Dear colleagues, let me thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this important conference. The title of my presentation is The Threat of Nuclear War and Common Security. I would like to approach the question of common security by sharing with you some ideas of mine concerning the view of the current state of mankind in the context of its social evolution. This view is based on evolutionary systems theory in general and on what I have called a critical social systems theory in particular. It is about a possible further step of the evolution of mankind. How can this step be realized? What are the objective preconditions and what are the subjective preconditions for this step? How far have the preparations for creating these conditions progressed? What is the role of common security in these preparations? And after all, how can the state of human evolution be assessed? First, let's ask, what does evolutionary systems theory tell us about the evolution of systems of any kind? This holds for any systems that self-organize. There are so-called metasystem transitions, that is, transitions of systems into a metasystem. If need be, systems align and produce together a system on a meta level. By doing so, the former systems that interacted with each other are now interacting within a system on a higher level. They are able to achieve goals they could not have been able to achieve before. That is, the resulting synergy effects are greater than before. They chose a path that is a breakthrough and not a path that is a breakdown. Having said this, we can ask, how does this apply to social systems evolution? Seen from a critical social systems view, this situation can be characterized as a developmental crisis of Homo sapiens without precedent. A polycrisis threatens the further existence of human beings on Earth. These challenges, being man-made, can only be met by working together of a common humanity. But mankind today consists at best of several interacting, interdependent and differentiated social systems, and it has got stuck on the edge of forming a metasystem of a common humanity. It has so far only become an objective community of destiny, but not yet a common humanity as a subject sui generis. The great bifurcation, the choice between disintegration or integration, can be mastered by a great transformation. This can elevate social evolution onto a higher level. We can ask now, what are the preconditions of this new step in social systems evolution? The answer is, a sufficient number of social actors must not only understand, but also accept the status of common destiny humanity. They must devise appropriate actions to overcome the crisis and must come into action. On the one hand, there are objective preconditions for the great transformation. It is the logics inherent at social, ecological, and technological developments that need to undergo changes to ensure good life for all members of humanity, an alliance with the agents of natural self-organizing systems, and an appropriate use of artificial hetero-organized artifacts. This knowledge can be formulated as planetary imperatives. On the other hand, there are subjective preconditions. They concern changes in the generation of social information itself that can be articulated as convivial imperatives. Namely, first, an imperative of a planetary ethos for global governance. This requires to expand the subjective capacity for cooperation, in that it anticipates the moral value of living together of humanity in a unity through diversity organization. Second, an imperative of planetary conciliatoriness for a global dialogue. This requires to extend the subjective communication skills in order to enable conciliatory discourses that anticipate the task of the wishful transformation and address any part of humanity. And third, an imperative of planetary mindsets for global citizenship. This requires to enlarge the subjective cognitive abilities to reflect one's own role in the overall planetary context, together with the roles of other actors and the role of parts that are not actors at all. These imperatives include the containment of the threat of nuclear warfare. The first imperative of living together peacefully calls for responsibility to protect all of humanity from annihilism, as I coined it. That is, the explicit justification or trivialization of brinkmanship that risks annihilation, its preparation or execution, or the implicit sleepwalking into annihilation. The second imperative of conciliatoriness necessitates the abandonment of any confrontation and use of violence of nuclear powers in conflicts, and the search for agreements and reconciliation instead. The third imperative of mindfulness demands peaceful coexistence, if not friendship, between nations, whether they are nuclear powers or not. So let's ask, how satisfactory is the compliance with such imperatives? To start with the planetary imperatives in the West, they seem to have been well received by academics and activists, while politicians tend to pay lip service to them, and business tends to take a wait-and-see approach. But setbacks must be taken into account. Countries in the global south cannot afford to do much because they lack the money, and the rich countries do not give them as much as they need. Many post-colonial countries find themselves forced into so-called extractivism, by which they want to share in the wealth of the former colonies. The People's Republic of China is an exceptional case. It is even catching up with the transformation goals announced. This holds for the convivial imperatives too, to follow on from here. For China appears to be the only country with a governmental program for a common future of humanity. It supports the BRICS Plus and the Global South that is aiming for a multipolar, polycentric, multinodal world order. It is important to emphasize here that these countries, just like those in the history of the non-alignment movement, do not want to join the West or any other bloc, but want to be open to all sides. The new world order shall not be dominated by multiple blocs that each strive for supremacy. This is an outdated approach to international politics. It shall rather become something new in which all the countries can find their place. What is striking is that what they try is exactly in line with the convivial imperatives. However, due to the omnipresence of capitalism, countries outside the golden billion are considered economic competitors, political autocracies, military enemies, and cultural rivals. Thus, interference in internal affairs, the imposition of unilateral coercive measures and other economic warfare operations, regime changes by launching color revolutions, the exclusion from common security architectures that promise security not at the expense of other partners, the prioritization of war logic over peace logic, e.g. the termination of arms control agreements, military build-up, and the abandonment of diplomacy, all this has been shaping Western foreign policy. Furthermore, fake narratives are manufactured for one's own population and readily adopted by Western media mainstream. This is how the Western masses are prepared now for the cold and ultimately a hot war. Last question. What about the responsibility to protect all of humanity from annihilism? What about the search for agreements? What about peaceful coexistence? Experts warn that the probability of a nuclear exchange is higher now than at the Cuba Missile Crisis in the 1960s. The Ukraine crisis has the potential to escalate into nuclear warfare. Why? What was intended by the Russian Federation as military operation after the West had denied diplomacy to solve the threat of the forward deployment of WS missiles close to its border escalated into a proxy war because the USA announced that the aim of Western aid to Ukraine was to weaken Russia. The Russian defense doctrine, however, stipulates the use of nuclear weaponry not only in the case of an aggression with nuclear weapons, but also in the case of an existential threat to the statehood of the Russian Federation, regardless of whether the weapons used are nuclear or not. What can be defined as an existential threat is up to the Russian government. Russian experts are even prompting politics to lower the nuclear threshold. By that, they expect to increase the deterrence of Western aggression. Conversely, however, it is then up to the Western politicians to be deterred or not. Hence, there is no guarantee that escalation can be controlled. When the Soviet Union still existed, the relationship between the nations were already negotiated in the UN in terms of collective security. A new way of thinking was initiated in the USSR, and the beginning of decisive arms control and disarmament were agreed with the US side. The Charter of Paris declared in 1990 equal security for all our countries. The Code of Conduct on politico-military aspects of security fixed in 1994 that the participating states, quote, remain convinced that security is indivisible and that the security of each of them is inseparably linked to the security of all others. They will not strengthen their security at the expense of the security of other states. End of quote. The NATO expansion to the east clearly violated this principle. This is the casus belli. The only solution of the Ukraine crisis is therefore to establish a new architecture of common security for Europe, for Eurasia, and for the whole world, and to embed Russia and nations friendly to Russia on an equal footing. This is the solution also for other military conflicts. Common security architectures are the means to implement compliance with the convivial imperatives. Common security understood in this way promotes the responsibility to protect all of humanity from annihilism. In fact, common security is the only way to perpetuate human life on Earth. Let's conclude now. How to describe the current state of the evolution of humanity. What we have is a battle between two sides, promoting contrary positions. One side battles for the continuation of the predominance of Western countries, which are all still rallying around the previous indispensable nation. And the other side, which is gaining momentum, battles for the establishment of equal cooperation between all nations for mutual benefit, which excludes no one. The compliance with both planetary and convivial imperatives, with the responsibility to protect all of humanity from annihilism, with diplomatic agreements, and with the renunciation of enemy images, may be assumed for the second side. If evolution of human systems is to progress to a higher level, thereby uniting humanity to master by far the greatest and most difficult task in human history, survival, and providing good life for everybody, then the second position must win. It has the potentiality to do so. Thank you for attention.